Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Coach Replay Show. I'm your host, or at least one of them this season. I've got to get used to that, Kim. I'm Cory Camp, and
I am Kim Ramadan. It's great to be with y'all today.
yeah, so this is kind of the last in our kind of back to school series where we have tried to bring you all some valuable tips as you're getting set up for the year for your instructional coaching, whether you are a full-time coach, a teacher leader who serves as an instructional support or coach person, or maybe you're a campus admin and you are also in that instructional leadership role, thinking about that specific role of coach and how do we set ourselves up for success? How do we establish relationships? And we've talked about a lot. We've talked about scheduling, we've talked about roles and responsibilities. So today we're going to be talking about differentiating your coaching. Kim and I do a lot of coaching of coaches, and we run some cohorts for instructional leaders around the idea of blended coaching, which we'll talk a little bit about today. And what I hear a lot, Kim, and I know you hear this in your cohorts that you run solo as well, is this kind of anxiety, some anxiousness around, I don't know, I've never formally been trained as a coach. I don't even know if I'm doing it right. And when we start to talk about the coaching, different stances that we can take and the different ways that it looks, there seems to be a little bit of like a sigh of relief, like, oh, so I have been coaching, or that is one of the ways I can coach. So what do you hear from coaches who, whether they've been formally trained or not, as they think about their role as a coach? Do you hear a lot of maybe some confusion or even frustration about the things that they do as a coach?
I think so. I think what has happened sometimes is there is an instructional leader that's been adopted, and their book has been part of a book study, or the philosophy has been adopted. And people sometimes, I think, get stuck in this rut of like, I have to do it this certain way. I have to follow this one person who is a leader in our field, and I can't deviate from that. And I was actually talking to somebody today that's in one of our cohorts in a one-on-one. And I was like, listen, we provide you with this guidebook, right? But there's not one way to do this thing. You don't have to have this exact agenda. You don't have to have these exact strategies. We're giving you some things, pick and choose what works for you. More importantly, what works for your teacher and ultimately the students, because it's not just about following one person's idea or one set of script, or all of these strategies from this book is the only thing that I can do with my teachers, and I have to follow it chapter 1 and 2 and 3, and this is exactly what it needs to look like. It just can't be that way. And so I think I think there was some anxiety going into that conversation, but I also think there was a lot of relief and her saying to me, oh my gosh, I feel so much better after talking to you. I thought it had to be do, and I'm like, no, like this is very dependent on who you have across from you or in front of you or beside you, who your teacher is. So that matters.
Yeah. And I mean, we know this as educators, that learning is not a one size fits all gig, right? And so if we know that about our student learners, there tends to be a disconnect when we start to think about our adult learners. I think some of this is how we've traditionally, right, done PD in the past for years, right? It's when are we going to find time for PD? Let's have this separate event that happens where we bring everybody in and we're going to try to like teach to the average, right? Kind of try to fit it all in.
Let's all go in the cafeteria.
Right.
Sit on the uncomfortable chairs for an hour. And
Learning is not one size fits all. Your
No.
coaching shouldn't be either. And exactly what you said, Kim, I hear of folks who, and we're big fans of the impact cycle, Jim Knight's work. The partnership approach just speaks to who I am as an individual and who I want to be as a coach. But every cycle, every impact cycle that I do with teachers has a different cadence to it, has a different flow, starts and ends in different places. We run through the cycle, right? Like a good, lesson cycle, but we don't always take the same avenue or stay in the same spots for the same amount of time. Because again, every individual, I kind of take a whole learner approach to my coaching. And I really think that's coaches who I've met who are really effective and efficient in their work do the same. They've got lots of tools in their toolboxes and they're reading the individual, listening to the individual and deciding, what does this person need? How can I meet them where they are and then continue to support their growth at whatever pace is appropriate for them. And so if you've been trained in, coaching cycles, and you think, well, I'm not coaching because I'm not in a cycle yet. I'm not doing cycles. Nobody wants to do a coaching cycle with me. You need to change your way of thinking about your coaching, because I bet you're coaching without even thinking about this formal cycle. So here's where I like to say, think about like a multi-tiered system of support. Think about, light, heavy, maybe even micro coaching. We'll define some of those for you here, but also think about, different tiers of your coaching support. So this is where I like to tell coaches, think about a digital library or a newsletter or a web page where you are kind of pushing out ideas and strategies that teachers might find to be really relevant and timely. It's not going to hit everybody at that in that way, but it might find some folks in that way. Kim, when you were coaching kind of at a regional level, did you have some system for that, or at least, something that you kind of had in the back end ready to go for the needs of your teachers?
Yeah. And I supported a lot of beginning teachers at that time. And I think there are a lot of different phases of beginning teachers and what they need in certain times of the year. So I think I would start my year often with how do we set routines and procedures? What are some really important things that you need to know? And things like that. I would have a weekly email that would go out that would kind of have like a little tip or a strategy or something like that. And typically it would be something around routines and procedures, relationships in the beginning of the year. And then it would evolve as the year goes on. And I think most people, maybe some people read it and said the next week, hey, I saw that. Thanks so much. Some maybe didn't. They used it if they needed to, and they didn't use it if they didn't need to. But that kind of went out to everyone as a way to say, like, here's something for everyone to think about this time of year. And then maybe around that time where we're in this like disillusionment phase, it's more like, come on, we can do it, just some tips for survival, during those times before that winter break. But I think, so people really appreciated that. And sometimes it came with some chocolate, but I think that there are those tier one things that you're talking about where everybody kind of gets that information or strategy. Those things happened and then it differed from there, and it had to.
Right. And so when I move beyond those tiers, then it's, maybe I see a need as I'm going through. And so I'm kind of saddling up next to that teacher and saying like, hey, would you like some support? I noticed you're working on this. I would love to help. Like, I'm really interested in that. If you would like that help, because they're not always coming and asking for help. Sometimes I find that as a field, we struggle with asking for help sometimes. And so
and for me, I was required to go into buildings every week and see teachers across the region. But like you're saying, everybody needs something different. So I had some people that really needed me to show them, like I had to model for them whatever the strategy was. That's what they needed. For some, I was able to give them a resource and say, hey, watch this video of this teacher, and I'm going to come in and do it with you. So we're going to kind of do this thing together. And some didn't even need that. They were just like off to the races. So everybody kind of needed something very different, and had different levels of comfortability, say it, with me, as someone who was outside of their building coming in too. That was a little bit different. So I think, and so some were open and welcomed with open arms, and then some were a little bit more hesitant, and that's okay. They had different experiences with coaching prior to me coming into that space too. So all of those things are to be considered.
Yeah. For some, it's a full like formal cycle where we're starting with the planning, and then we're observing the implementation and reflecting with that teacher. And then we're looking at the data afterwards and planning those next steps. Like that, like it's a heavier coaching cycle where we're kind of really diving into every part of lesson design, implementation, and that assessment piece. Other times, like you said, like they gravitate towards a particular strategy, or they mention something and you go, oh yeah, I've got a resource for that. And that's all they needed.
That's it.
Like, it's almost like this easy button. I feel like Stephanie Affinito talks a little bit about that. I think I've heard her use that term. And then, other times it's even lighter than that. So one thing that I came across 2 years ago now, it was kind of at the start of the pandemic, was a article. I found that my coaching really shifted. It was a lot less of the teachers having the ability and the brain space, right, to follow through. Their cognitive load was maxed out. And so, but they had some very specific needs, and they were usually pretty short term. Like, I just need to know how to take this thing I used to do in person and do that meaningfully. I need a tool. I need a quick demo of a specific, Zoom chat. Like, how do I maximize my use of that? Do I turn it off, or are there ways that I can use that? And so I was doing a lot of, like, my library really filled up at that time because I was creating lots of tips and tutorial videos for teachers. That was kind of this just in time. So you mentioned this, let me create a video for you on that. So you can view it at your own pace. And I came across this Forbes, of course, I'm getting all the pop-ups now, this Forbes magazine article on micro coaching. And it made so much sense to me. And I was like, that's actually, I wasn't doing these longer, 3 meeting kind of cycles. My impact cycle was just kind of all over the place with teachers, but I was doing these quick, super short check-ins. You tell me a need that you need, I'm going to be the gopher and go find that, or share that, or give you some quick feedback on some of your ideas. And we'll meet again, maybe next week, maybe when you need me again. And so I really love this as a strategy. Something that's important to know is micro coaching is not the only type of coaching you should be doing. Again, you should have a differentiated approach. What are the needs? What are the goals of the individual? What's their capacity, right? Like, what's their level of awareness for reflection? And we talk about that a lot in our coaching. And how do I support them? This, I think, Kim, circles us back to our episode where we talked about having like a coaching menu and thinking about how you schedule out your day. So this, I think, we shared this resource from the Literacy Professional Journal back in, I think, episode 2, but I'm just going to scroll on over. How about I just use my tools here and find multi-tiered coaching example. So this one is a great way to think about this as well, of like, what are your different levels? So coaching activities by levels of intensity, essentially. What's your level 1? These are informal, building relationships. Maybe it's sharing out, it's that newsletter. It's, hey, I've got a new resource for you. Level 2 is a little bit more formal, but not too much, right? Like, you're having your team meetings, maybe you're analyzing some student work, doing a little bit of planning of instruction, but you're not there for every bit of the lesson cycle. And level 3 is you're heavier, more focused, you're having more frequent meetings with your teachers, they're longer. So I think this is a good way to think about our coaching as well. And I don't think that that's always a view of coaching. It's that we're going to try to pigeonhole and create kind of the perfect cycle or the perfect set of activities so we can have expectations for our coaches, but also so our teachers understand it. But I feel like there needs to be room to breathe within our coaching programs. What do you think?
Yeah, and I think there has to be too, because sorry, the dog is barking downstairs. But I think there has to be room to breathe, because oftentimes we have so many people that we're coaching. We can't in a realistic way coach everyone at a level 3, because oftentimes there's 12, 13, 14. In my case, there was 30 plus teachers across a region that couldn't all get that same level of support. And they didn't need it either, but it just makes sense, I think, to have these different levels. I love the idea of the micro coaching. It's not something that I think I formally knew about. I think kind of informally did that because of the time that I had with people. I didn't always have an hour, to spend with somebody.
Right.
But I think our capacity for something like that is a lot lower right now. And so I think it makes a lot of sense to do that sometimes when it fits. But yeah, this is a really great chart that kind of just puts into writing what we've been talking about in terms of really tiering people and making sure that they're getting what they need. You have capacity to give them that, because you're not trying to do a level 3 or a tier 3 with everyone that you work with. It just doesn't seem reasonable. And people also might shift throughout the year. Somebody who's level 3 might be 2-1, not to say that it's a bad thing to be a level 3. I think it's just what they need. But somebody who at different parts of the year, level 1, they really didn't need that much, but now we're getting into something a little different, or the things have shifted, they might not be a level 1 anymore. They might be a level 3.
Right. And again, I think, this would be something that I would maybe have in my coaching menu. Like, what type of support do you want? Do you want to do a full cycle of coaching, understanding that your teachers should know what that means? Or, do you just want to you just need a sounding board? Do you just want to talk through a couple of ideas real quick, see if I have any other resources, or see if I, know of anybody who's maybe doing something? Sometimes I'm not the best person to coach you. Maybe it's a peer that I can set you up with, because I'm in all of the classrooms. I'm able to see and say, oh, it's not me you need to talk to. You really need to go talk to Jenny down the hall. Mm-hmm. She's doing this. And I think she's going to be able to, you guys are going to really be able to work together with that. So
yeah. Wouldn't it be great if somebody came to you and was like, I have a level 1 question. And you were like, oh, I know, right? Yeah. I'm ready. Or like, I have a level 3 problem, and you could just be like, oh, I know what that means. Like that language.
I had a campus administrator who did something similar to that. She'd be like, all right, before you get too far into this, Cory, because I'm a talker, she would say, am I listening, or am I listening for a solution? Like, am I just like, oh man, like that really does stink, and I can see how that's frustrating. Yep. You want me to find a solution. And that's always helpful too. But yeah, that would be great if you could utilize this language so much that your teachers are like, level 3 over here, so, but it shifts throughout the year as students' needs, curriculum focus shifts throughout the year as different priorities come up from, the campus or the individual. So I think all of those things are important. I think the other thing that is really helpful for coaches to think about is, with each of these levels, there's different sets of tools that you can use to carry these out in a really not just efficient way, but one that honors everybody's time. And really that's what this differentiated coaching is about. It's situational, so that way we can meet people where they are and give them what they want. If I am coasting along, doing pretty well, I'm open to some new strategies and ideas, but I'm hyper focused on the thing that I'm doing and getting that done well. I don't necessarily want someone coming and forcing me to walk through that reflective process with them all the way. Like sometimes I need to do that solo. Other times I need a partner to help me kind of think outside the box and see things in different perspectives. And so this is also about meeting the teacher's, needs as a learner, but also their desires to own their own learning, whether they're working with you or they're working independently. And I think that's key. That's about building relationships. That's about working smarter, not harder. That's about having better impact in our coaching, is if we are well-versed in a variety of needs, knowing when I should be directive versus dialogical versus facilitative. And that doesn't all come overnight. So if you're a new coach and you're like, whoa, this just got real deep and heavy, you can take it one step at a time. Like focus yourself, maybe tier your teachers, identify a few folks who need a few different levels, and just practice with them and get their feedback. Was this the right type of support for you? What was the most meaningful thing that we did together for you today? What can I do again to make this more meaningful, or what can I not do to make this more meaningful? I think that's all good information for us.
I love it.
Yeah. So think about this. Think about how you can use technology to do this. I am a fan of newsletters. Are great. Smore is one of my favorite resources, although I haven't done one of those in forever. So maybe there's a better one than Smore out there. If you've got good resources for newsletters, I'm sure other coaches and leaders watching would love those. Yeah. So share in the comments. I'm also a big fan of having a digital library. Again, this week's newsletter and amazing content created by my coach may not be something I really am open to hearing because my attention's somewhere else. But can I go back to it? Can I search your newsletters to find the thing that I need? So think about how you're archiving the resources. Is it in some kind of library or web page that's categoried and tagged? Is that something that you could set as a goal for this year to set up? So then your teachers have more on-demand access to those things. When is video going to be an appropriate tool for you in these levels, so that teachers, again, can have more autonomy? All right, Kim, as you think about the coaches who are maybe thinking in a new light about their coaching and their cycles, or they're just kind of sitting back and going, all right, I'm seeing this, I'm thinking about different tiers. Do you have any advice, any last words for them as we wrap up our show today?
I mean, I think it goes back to just trying not to be overwhelmed at all of the things that are out there, because there are so many. When I first started coaching, there were not as many resources for coaches, and now there are an abundance of resources. So maybe just take one thing that you learned today, if it's tiering your teachers, and really trying to think strategically about how you can differentiate for them. But don't get overwhelmed by the amount of things that are out there. Just really start small, one day at a time, and just listen to what they want, what they need.
Yeah. Focus on something small, focus on doing that well. And then you can, like a really good dip, start to just layer things on, or maybe lasagna is a better term. Now I'm hungry. Well, as we wrap up, as we're recording today, it is Kim's birthday, y'all. So happy birthday to you, Kim.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining me today for our fourth episode of this season on your birthday.
Happy to be here. Wow. Nowhere else I'd rather be. Thank you all.
Thanks, everyone. And be sure to follow, like, and subscribe to our show. If you have topics or scenarios you'd like us to cover, always feel free to drop those in the comments or email learn@sibme.com. You can also download our notes and takeaways for every episode at learn.sibme.com. Did I say both of those are the same thing? We really have to think of different email and website.
We got it.
Similar.
Yep.
All right. It's in the comments the correct way. If I said it incorrectly, we'll see y'all next week. Bye, everyone.
Bye.